What's up, folks, and welcome to Indie Ramble. So, I got a little action adventure game for you today, and this one's kind of interesting. It's one of those ones that came across my radar unexpectedly, and I've actually finished it. I finished it while I was on vacation recently, and I think this is not going to necessarily be for everyone, but it's presented in a really cool way, and that's why I wanted to show it to you. So, this is the Tale of Bistun, and it's kind of interesting. It comes to us from a developer who actually was originally an art outsourcing studio. They didn't actually make their own stuff, but they decided to take a crack at it, and this is what they did. And it's published by a Polish publisher who has a mixed track record, shall we say, and this is a bit out of their normal wheelhouse as well. So, but it's got some really interesting things going for it. It's not a complicated game. It's not a long game. I beat it in only, I think, under 3 hours. And it's pretty easy, and it's as much kind of a walking sim as an action game, but it does some things that I really like. And it's telling the story. It's actually a Persian folk tale that it's retelling. So this is based on an actual, it's based on a poem, actually. But it's sort of retelling that story in an interesting, stylish way. So I've actually finished it, but this game does not have Steam cloud saves, which I think in the era of the Steam Deck, Valve should be mandating. It's apparently dead easy to enable. Seriously, devs, do that if you would, because I finished this on my laptop. But I started over at the beginning here because it's not something you really want to spoil a lot of. So I've skipped the intro kind of tutorial section. We're in the first chapter here. So not really spoilers because you'll run into this about 5 minutes after you start. But you're going to see right off the bat one of the things that I really think is endearing about this game.
What happened? The man cried. Where have you taken me?
Calm yourself, human. Did you not want to leave that alien realm?
The tree leaned closer and introduced himself as All Seeds, a pomegranate tree. I don't know who I am, the man said. All Seeds pondered.
Others like me have been afflicted by a sickness. Help them, and I will return the favor.
All Seeds told the man to look for talisman stones, strange rocks protruding from the ground. Destroying the talisman stones would free his kind. Then, the mighty tree extended a great branch outwards, pointing east.
Unearth the Canot Gate to find.
So I'm going to skip the rest of that there, but that is what I wanted to let you guys hear because this is one of the coolest things about this game. Much like a lot of Supergiant titles like Bastion and even Hades to a certain degree, this game is fully narrated, and the narrator is fantastic in my opinion. He has this really good flourish about his delivery that is the kind of thing you'd like to hear if you know you're listening to a fantasy story. Honestly, I think if it didn't have that, the game would be much lesser for it. But it really makes it a much more compelling experience just to listen to this guy tell everything as he goes. And he does act out the other voices, but he doesn't overdo it too much. I think his delivery is honestly really excellent. Really impressed with that. So, core gameplay is fairly simple. You're going to go through these levels here in the overworld, which has been afflicted by some kind of plague. And you are also a person who has lost your memory, and you're trying to get it back and also help contain this plague as you go. And you're going to go between two different kinds of levels. So there's this type of level here where you're sort of in the overworld, and you have to find your way through, and you'll have to take out groups of enemies along the way. And then there's another more celestial kind of ethereal world that you're going to enter into as well, and I will show you that too, where the experience is a little bit more simplified, except when you run into bosses, of which there are a couple in the game. So here's the idea here. You have these sort of plague crystals that break apart and spawn enemies. And then you have to take out the enemies in this sort of almost God of War style, like really hack and slashy kind of fashion. And then when you take out all of them in a given area, the sort of main plague stone that's afflicting the area becomes vulnerable. You smack it, the area is purified, and off you go. Now, there's a little more to it than that. There are additional kinds of enemies. There's different kinds of weapons that have different kind of attacks you can use. There's a special attack you're able to use at a certain point, and the levels do get longer. But I will tell you that this game is not difficult. When I played it on my laptop, I think during my whole playthrough, I died 3 times, and 2 of them were to the final boss. So this game is really more about the story, but I think it puts in some of this action to give the game a failure state of some kind, and also to make it a little bit more gamey and less walking simulator. And I can appreciate that, but you're not going to come to this for the combat. This is not a Diablo or something like that. There's no inventory, there's no loot, the upgrades are at scripted points and fairly minor. There's not a lot to it in that respect. So you see here that we've cleared the enemies out, we've purified the area, and you have this little bird called a hoopoe that it's kind of your waypoint guide, though it does come into the story a little bit later on as well. So really what this does is what the combat really does is to serve to give you something to do while you're listening to the story being told and exploring the environments. Now, as I said, the developer of this is principally an art outsourcing studio, and it shows. I think the art in this is quite striking. You know, it's not necessarily high poly, but it's got this very nice storybook look to it that I think works very well for what they're trying to tell here. So that's sort of that area. Now you're going to see the part of the game that I do find kind of the most interesting in many ways, and most certainly the most visually striking. So you report back to All Seeds. You eat one of his spicy pomegranates. And then you'll see where we end up here. So you get a little sort of interlude here, which I'll skip as well. These are little cutscenes and they're kind of cool, but I'm going to try to spoil as little as possible. And then what you do is you have to dig into this mountain. Now, so this is actually Mount Bistun, which is where the Tale of Bistun comes from. The name of the game is not based on the character. It's based on this mountain. So you sort of get these little interesting interludes, and this sort of fleshes out a little bit more about who Farhad is and his tale and his struggle. So you will know a lot more about him by the end, obviously.
Does she want amethyst
So
stones?
once you complete one of these sort of main world areas, you end up in this sort of ethereal dream world. And this is really cool, though it does have a couple of things that I'm a little unsure why they chose to do it, and I'll show you that here. So this is it. Now this is where visually I think this game really, really shines. I love the choice of color here. I love the look of the environment. You're going to see how the levels take shape as you go through them. This sort of spacey, starry background I think is just gorgeous. This is where the art chops of this team really come into focus. I think this looks great. Now, aside from a couple of particular battles, these areas are purely narrative in nature. This is where the game is more of a walking sim. You're going to walk through the environment, you're going to smash these stones that are impeding things, the level's going to evolve like this, and you're going to get some interesting story stuff out of it. The one thing that does bother me here is they take away your run ability in these levels, which I just find weird. I don't know why they do that. I understand they kind of want you to take this in, and that there's a lot of story that the game is giving you here, and if you rush through it, maybe you wouldn't get it all. But it just seems a little strange that, you know, you're used to being able to run through the world, and then all of a sudden it takes that ability away from you when you're in this zone. But that's a minor quibble, to be honest with you. Yeah, I just think this is really stunning, and I really enjoyed. I did enjoy the world and being in the different parts of the game, but in particular, I really love these areas just because they're so striking and really just have this very cool style to them. But that's the thing. Not everyone's going to be interested in this kind of game. I admit I didn't know about it until I got offered a code for it out of the blue, but I looked at it and went, this looks kind of interesting. And indeed it was. It's a very short game. I think some people are going to find that between that and the fact that the combat is very basic, that they don't feel it has a lot of value there. That's subjective, of course, but if I'd paid full price for this, I would have enjoyed the time I spent with it. Just because it's an interesting story. I hadn't heard of this folktale before, so it's interesting to hear it told, and told so well. And it has this really nice look wrapped around it, and yeah, it was just an enjoyable, honestly relaxing time. Like I said, I only died, I believe it was 3 times, and 2 of them were to the final boss. It's not, the game doesn't have difficulty settings, it doesn't need them. It's not hard. You could hand a controller to someone who basically doesn't play games with this, and I don't think they'd have much trouble getting to the end of it. And they weren't aiming for this to be a big action RPG. That much is very clear. They thought they had what they thought was an interesting story, and they wanted to be able to make sort of an interactive fairy tale and use their artistic chops to do it. You know, this is a developer that clearly did this as a passion project and an experiment, and they didn't want to bite off more than they could chew by being over ambitious and effectively trying to make a game, you know, that ended up being beyond their means. And you know, on all those fronts, I think they succeeded. I think they did really well. So yeah, I did enjoy this quite a bit. It is something you got to be in. You know, I've said it a million times that I have very high standards for walking simulators, because there's a very fine line between being a, you know, a unique and interesting storytelling medium and just being a pretentious thing by someone who doesn't know how to make good games. But I think this straddles the line well, where it puts in enough gameplay to make it interesting, but also enough narrative to keep that part of it interesting. It has enough of both that it's compelling, at least to me. You know, a lot of the most popular walking sims out there are games that I was not really a fan of, but I thought this was pretty cool. And, you know, something a little bit different, which is always nice to see sometimes. But you've really seen the majority of this already. If I go much further, I'm going to spoil more. So if you're interested in this, you should pick it up and see the story for yourself, I think. But if the gameplay here didn't interest you, it doesn't really get that much more interesting. There's different kinds of enemies. And they're, you know, the levels get a little bit more challenging, but not to a significant degree. There's a couple of boss fights that are quite impressive in their size and scope from a set piece point of view, but again, not very difficult. And once you've seen the story, you've seen it. There are a few collectibles in the game that you can get that flesh out things a little bit more, but that's really about it. And once you've finished it, you've finished it. This isn't something you're going to replay, but I liked it. I thought it was cool, and it was a good game to play on my vacation. You know, wasn't high effort, but felt satisfying at the end. So yeah, that is the Tale of Bistun. Again, check it out if you're into narrative stuff, maybe with a little bit of a twist, and you want to hear you know, an interesting folktale that is not something you would commonly know. You know, it's something from a specific culture, and we don't see that, especially in video game form, very often. So you know, I think it's something that's different, and I like it for that. So thank you for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. If you liked what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things, like, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment down below. Tell me, what do you think about this? Does this interest you? What other games are like this that are out there that you like? Tell me what your favorite walking sims are even. I'd like to hear about that too, because there's probably some other things out there that I've missed that I should check out. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover indie and retro stuff over there, including some indie titles that are better suited to streaming that you won't see over here. I have a great community there, and I'd love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, folks, and I'll see you on the next Indie Ramble. You guys have a good one. Take her easy.